So I think I'm gonna come up front for just a minute, just to.
I'm gonna sneak over there too.
Oh gosh, I can see why you didn't want to be over there.
Yeah.
Just to thank you all for being here. During the presentation, I'm gonna hang out over by the computer. But I am really excited to be here. I thank Susan and Dan and Brian for kind of orchestrating this series and inviting me to be a part of it. And I've been in Albuquerque almost 6 years. I'm approaching my anniversary date. So this is a place that I've come to learn to love, and I've really appreciated finding UrbanABQ as an organization of like-minded people who are really just, really excited about a place. You find so many, in so many cities and neighborhoods, you can find a lot of people complaining, right? And waiting for somebody else to do something really good. And I think UrbanABQ has been a really important forum and a venue for discussing things that matter to the city and actually taking action. So I really appreciated that. My talk today is really about this intersection of design and health and equity. And it's a topic that has really kind of excited me like no other for probably at least a decade. Some of you in the room already know about my interest in this area that is just growing and growing. So I look forward to your comments and questions, and this is just kind of a primer or what I think I know now. And just let me know if I need, because I'm going to be here. I don't know if I have to come around the column or something like that, but I've been known to be able to talk in a room of about 400 people without a microphone. So we'll see how that goes. So this is a concept that I am working on with a bunch of people, and I really hope to, it kind of brings together a lot of my interests in community design. That's what really got me interested or led me to academia, was a way to think about design that could really help serve, engage, complement, collaborate with people who don't usually have access to it. And this recent discussion about the intersection of health and design is really ramping up quickly. Many organizations are talking about it. It's becoming increasingly becoming a value in practice, and certainly discussion in universities, etc. So to get to just healthy and sustainable places, I'm just kind of calling this really equitable urbanism. The urban scale is really necessary. So Susan mentioned I'm on the board of, recently joined. That's good, thank you. That's great, Dale, thank you. Because I can still see, you can still see. Okay. The National Board of the Congress of the New Urbanism. And in a recent, maybe my first board meeting, we came up with this idea, some of us, that an equitable city or a goal is a city in which anyone could live and thrive regardless of socioeconomic status or ability. You could find places to live, they could find places to work, they can get there between the two places, etc. And so important at this point is to talk about the concept of equity. So a lot of us talk about equality, and there's a big difference between, or a significant difference between equality and equity, as illustrated by, I've learned this from actually my public health colleagues, that says equality is the idea that equal distribution of inputs, of resources. That sounds good. Everybody gets the same. However, not every person and not every place has the same set of basic conditions. And so some need more in order to achieve the same outcome. So equity is an outcomes-focused concept, while equality is often an inputs-based concept. So in an equitable situation, everybody has equal access to the same benefits, to the same amenities, to the same, really, maybe it's opportunity. This was an interesting quote I heard from the Centers for Disease Control, and now Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and many others say, your zip code tells more about your life chances, your life expectancy, than your genetic code. That's a pretty powerful statement, and it proves out in the data, right? You can see unequal distribution of amenities and inputs, and an unequal experience of health outcomes. And life expectancy is the big one, right? Because if you have all these other health disparities or inequities, you're probably not going to live as long. So for instance, in Albuquerque, we see a difference in life expectancy of anywhere from 15 to 20 years by neighborhood. So the southeast Heights, the life expectancy is about 71 years, I think.
Wow.
And in the Northeast Heights, about 85 or 86 or so. So this leads to this concept of, so why would that be the case? Well, there are great economic, social, and health disparities exist, even among neighborhoods in the same city as I mentioned. This is a result of multiple factors. It's not like if I go move into a house in the Southeast Heights, I'm suddenly going to cut 10 years off my life, right? But we see things like socioeconomic sorting. We see the economics of real estate. What neighborhoods are more valued or valuable, and we see definitely a difference in the quality of place that is highly correlated with socioeconomic status. But to add to this, even despite what I just said, recent studies have actually shown that people get healthier after moving to, the air quotes, better neighborhood. Okay? And some were natural experiments where people were given an opportunity to move. So here's a concept: social determinants of health. Another thing I've been learning from my public health colleagues, as defined by the World Health Organization and underscored by a bunch of others, the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. So what this means, it's a contextual issue. It's not all of that DNA stuff, the conditions of your family, the diabetes that your grandfather developed when he was 30 or whatever. These are those contextual issues rather than behavior, rather than genetics, etc. And they include things like economic stability, education, social and community context, access to health and health care, or access to health care and your general health and well-being. But neighborhood and built environment actually turn out to be significant contributors. Actually ones that cost a lot less than MRIs, triple bypass surgery, etc. And they include your environmental conditions, the general quality of the environment, access to healthy food, food security, and food justice, the quality of housing, safety, crime, and violence, and of course, opportunities for physical activity. And the health outcomes related to these will be no surprise to some health people in the audience, are things like the strongest correlation I've found so far are with obesity and diabetes, and of course, stress and heart disease, and general productivity. And obesity and stress are two essential characteristics, health characteristics, that have multiple health, related health outcomes. So, can anybody tell me what's wrong with this picture?
No shelter.
Is that color?
Obstructed sidewalk, no shelter,
Right next to the traffic.
no bike lane,
Bike lane, yeah.
Looks like most of them.
no shade. We're walking on a narrow sidewalk right next to a very busy
And this really
corridor,
unfortunate looking place.
and this lovely place you would want to walk by.
Yes.
No place to go right there. And in addition, the dryness of the climate here also means that you have more exposure to blowing dust and stuff like that. And then a busy corridor like Central also has greater carbon emissions from the traffic, greater noise levels that can lead to stress, inability to concentrate. And could you just imagine walking with your family down the street and maybe waiting for the bus? Okay, so I want to talk about 4 general concepts that contribute to this idea of equitable urbanism. One is mobility. It's social, economic, physical mobility. A physical being that just the ability to get around and meet your daily needs, and of course socioeconomic mobility is the opportunity or having opportunities to change one's status, chances, security, etc. Stability, the security of housing, of access to food, knowing where your next meal comes from. That concept of not knowing is called food insecurity. Choice, the idea that one has options at your price point. That just because your income is at a certain level doesn't restrict you to just one choice that may be not a good choice for your family. And perhaps, if we go by this concept, maybe in every city. And what if it were in every neighborhood? I know, maybe not. This other idea about the opportunity to at least enjoy and feel safe and comfortable and welcome in any neighborhood is an important one. And finally, the 4th is the of voice. Meaningful participation, the concept of agency, the ability to initiate ideas, initiate change, to resist change, or to promote change is an important component. So, the built environment tools that I think, or that I am most interested in related to these outcomes, come on in and get out of your way, okay, is urban design. So I'll talk about 4 essential components, because urban design really is about place as an ensemble of ingredients. Housing and neighborhoods, the public realm, the places that we share and where we might actually run into people that we don't know, access to goods and services, and of course the connections between all of these elements. And this illustration is just, it's a master plan, but it gives you the great idea. The Urban Land Institute is one of many organizations that's taken on the mantle of building healthy places and the correlation between the built environment and community health. They identify 3 essential areas, and that is that idea of the facilities for the safety of physical activity, access to healthy food and drinking water, and a general healthy environment that contributes to social well-being. Well-being is one of those that's harder to maybe measure, and but is so essential, because that idea of social well-being And connectedness is really kind of a foundation to how we feel about the places in which we live, right? So let's look at a couple of those places. Community gathering places are so important of a variety, right? They offer that respite, that difference between where you work and where you live. And they can offer many amenities that maybe not all of us can afford to have in our housing in our neighborhoods. The housing is also very important. When all of these things come together, the kinds of neighborhoods where we live, this example is Playa Vista in Los Angeles, that's my hometown. The last big infill project in LA, built on new urbanist principles, has mixed use, a lot of commercial and retail uses on the ground floor. All of the housing in Playa Vista is dense. All of it. No single family residential. There's plenty of that in neighborhoods around. But this gives people a choice to be in very walkable neighborhood where they can meet most of their daily needs without ever getting in all of these cars, which are important to protect us from the moving ones, I guess. So, what are healthy communities by design? This idea about being intentional in creating places that will result in healthier outcomes and support people. So healthy communities include access to daily needs via multiple modes by a range of people, of age, of ability, of income, etc. That there are healthy food options, and they're not all whole foods, because we know that access also means affordability. So that can be through grocery stores, but also gardens. Safe transportation options that include walking, biking, skateboarding, public transit, all those things that can get you to where you need to go. And feel safe and comfortable doing it. A variety of housing options by type, by size, by tenure, and whether home ownership or rental, and by price point. You know, an interesting side note here is a lot of, until recently, and you know why, at least until 2008, the big answer for everybody, regardless of income, was home ownership. That's the answer. That's the product we're going for, and we see how that went. A lot of people don't even care about that. And a lot of people aren't ready for that. And access to nature. This idea, many studies have shown this correlation between being able to actually get out in nature, to be around trees, maybe, hike. That's stuff we kind of take for granted here in New Mexico. But, I was recently visiting my son and his girlfriend in Brooklyn, and we were talking about camping. They were like, yeah, we're really trying to get out camping next weekend because we are never around nature until they get on a train for a couple of hours and they backpack into some place by the way. And I'm like, we really can take that for granted, but it is so important. Not to mention all of the positive environmental impacts that plant materials offer. And then finally, this aligning with voice is that idea of agency, because we can put in all these pieces, but what's most important is the opportunity to influence those decisions and to act on one's own behalf, or on your neighborhood's behalf, or on your family's behalf. To say, yeah, we really do want this splash pad, or we don't, right? Because every place and every community is different. Another little side note. So this image is from Cincinnati, a huge redevelopment project that is still ongoing in my old neighborhood of Over the Rhine. Lots of questions about displacement and gentrification, etc. But this park, Washington Park, and its redesign and redevelopment is actually one of the most successful projects in the city, and Dale knows this because he's been there with me. Where you can find people of every background enjoying this public and the splash pad and the playground where kids are, because kids don't sort like adults do. It's just amazing, and so then the parents are forced to sit next to each other. So I think we learn a little bit about each other. Something was going to happen there. No. So these ideas of the actual built environment locations, of home, of community, of connectivity, and diversity, and finally fun. 5 aspects that I think really contribute to an equitable, healthy, just place. So let's talk a little bit about housing. It's every kind of housing, right? All kinds of modes. There's no one type. The important thing is having access to it, feeling safe, and feeling secure in it. On the left is actually Project Row Houses that was developed by the artist Rick Lowe, who got this idea to save these shotgun homes in Texas, and got them together on a site, worked with artists. Many are kind of temporary studios, and others are subsidized homes for young single mothers, a chance to kind of grow together in a supportive environment, and really get a better chances. And on the right is an example from San Diego in the neighborhood of Little Italy. And Rob Quigley worked with other architects to develop these kind of dense, multi-family, mixed-use projects. This particular one is actually a shelter, a transitional shelter for homeless men. Yeah. And it just, gosh, you wouldn't know it by looking at it. Thank goodness. And shouldn't it be that way?
Yes.
Right. I'll share with you just briefly a project in which I was involved in Louisville, and as part of a great city comprehensive plan, revisiting the master plan for downtown, which was expanded to include this neighborhood in which public housing existed that was developed in the 30s. And so if we take this kind of strategy, we looked at, it's probably obvious where the public housing is located. For one, it's highlighted in gray, but the other is the morphology of it is quite different. The form, right? Those long blocks, just kind of quintessential public housing blocks. By then, probably about 98% African American, definitely 100% at or below poverty level. As many of you know, public housing it didn't start this way, but progressively has become kind of a ghetto of single mothers with children living in poverty. So, but for many reasons, this site became, kind of well located suddenly as downtown got redeveloped, as a minor league baseball stadium was developed by the riverfront. So what's going to happen in this neighborhood? And I was fortunate. I was actually in the middle of my master's degree program when I got to come back and work on this project with some of my classmates, but through working with my teacher, Alex Krieger at Chan Krieger. But we came up with a scenario. We were very much influenced by some work done by William Julius Wilson and some others that found that indicators of social dislocation, including crime, including high school dropout rates, and a bunch of other things, were disproportionately high when poverty levels exceeded 40% by census tract or by neighborhood. So we use that as kind of a goal, because certainly this neighborhood, as I said, was largely, even when you take into account the surrounding neighborhoods, was very, very high poverty rate, etc. And our goal was to get this neighborhood, this census tract, down to below 40%, right? This is in the era of Hope 6, now gone. Many of you know about HUD's Hope 6 program to redevelop or rehabilitate public housing, which really meant demo it all and rebuild it as mixed income housing, usually in a new urbanist pattern, because there was a lot of influence from the CNU in developing that policy. So we knew that that could come, and there were some pretty bad, unfortunate, probably unintended outcomes that came from that. That's dispersing a community that really relies on being together, really relies on their location and their proximity to public transit, to other amenities. They were close to downtown. So my role in this was to work with the residents of Clarksdale, which was the public housing community, to talk about what they really valued, what they might like to see in their neighborhood, or what they might like to see in their own housing choices. So we learned a lot about that idea of the location and the being able to preserve a sense of community. So actually, we also mapped all the vacant properties here, and we said, it's possible maybe to relocate people without relocate them out of their projects, that title, without relocating them out of their neighborhood. So we had this goal of reducing poverty, having people poverty levels, having people move once, and creating great choices for people if they were to relocate. This did lead to a successful Hope 6 application. We didn't participate in that, and I was a little, frankly worried about that whole thing. But the resulting plan was a little different than what we what we conceptualized, but had similar ideas. And that was to do new development along an important corridor that would be have premium transit, and do a lot of mixed income and mixed use development along that corridor. Start that first and start to move people from Clarksdale, and then redevelop Clarksdale itself to be a similar kind of neighborhood that knits into the fabric of the surrounding neighborhoods. And this is just a zoom in of this part to look at the ways that development is going to go. It's an important part of setting a vision, is saying what it might look like, is just kind of background buildings. And so you see the principal goals, the mix, the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 mix of market rate, middle income, low income, the mix of partially through typology, partially by subsidy, but typology is a big, important part of this. That you could do, 300 of the same kind of unit, and then say some are subsidized, but people don't need the same kind of unit. You can actually create income mix just by having a range of sizes of units, of types. So we had a mix of flats, a mix of multifamily apartments, single family detached, single family attached, and then there would be an additional 10% more affordable housing. And so, as you can see, the strategy there for rehousing Clarksdale residents, some would be on-site, some would be within 1 mile, and 20%, and this would just be housed elsewhere through attrition and other methods. And a lot of studies supported that idea that some people just want to make another decision. So, and redistributing green space, etc. So, let's go to public realm and community spaces. These are essential. As I said before, these are the places that we meet people that we don't know, that we might take visitors, that we might just go hang out for a break, or we might meet people, meet friends, or whatever. This happens to be in Puerto Rico, I think. But it's just like so many squares there where there's a little bit of vending, trees, just a difference. The pigeons are a little disconcerting, right? But, it makes for good pictures.
Yeah.
And then Millennium Park, as many of you know, this park has so many different components, but what got me on this particular great day in the summer was the range of people using it like it was their backyard. Not dressed up. They're dressed to be in the water or like they're at the beach that doesn't exist. And so I think it's another very successful public space where you really feel like belongs to you. Here are some other examples from Dallas on the left. I think that's Cincinnati on the right, where these little pockets also just help people have another place to hang out, to enjoy something they don't get at home. Seating, water was one important part that we saw. Having places to sit. So many cities have spent years eliminating places to rest. Because God forbid somebody who needs to rest might actually rest there. So I don't know, why are there no people in this picture? It's early in the morning in Puerto Rico, and the cruise ships have already left, I think. So finding opportunities to let activity spill out into the street. Yes, in this case, in Cleveland, in most cases, to get to these seats, you probably have to be a customer. So I like the other ones where you don't have to be a customer. But a mix of these is really great. Seattle has done a lot of work around food landscapes or edible, productive landscapes. On the left is a huge example in the International District, once Chinatown in Seattle, where a site that's not pretty tough for development because of the topography, is converted to a community garden that largely serves the huge community of people of Asian descent, where they grow foods that are important to their traditions, to their history, to their sense of community and family. And it's really big. Steve Bedaines, with his students from the University of Washington, contributed to the design there. On the right is this interesting idea that's by ordinance that allows people to use the right of way to garden. And most of them have food in them. So you can see the lettuces and other things growing here, and they pop up all over.
But flowers.
And it can be flowers, it can be food, it's everything, because people just have the right to use the public space. And then there are these other, I forget the name of the program, but these community gardens pop up in all kinds of vacant spaces, and they're part of a whole system now. Many of you know about the idea of parklets. San Francisco famously has been able to write this into zoning and ordinances to allow private citizens, usually businesses, to participate in converting places for cars to places for people. And so then there are lots of provisions. So we've experimented with this here. With the idea of parquitos. Tim Trujillo, no longer with us, not because he died, but yes, but worked really hard to try to develop a draft ordinance for Albuquerque to adopt. I think you should all get behind it, and we should make that happen. But they're just great kinds of, so interesting, the different designs, and the provision that it has to be open to the public, even though it is sponsored, maintained, paid for by the private sector. The idea that places can change, and you have this kind of informal vending as part of public space. We need all of these rights in public space, and not only the right to vend, but the right not to vend. And not only the right to buy, but the right not to buy. And not to just walk. To loiter, I think, is an important right. Yes. We need to get rid of a lot of those rules. So access for all, the idea of connectivity. for people of all abilities, all ages, all modes, etc. How do we make sure that the design of especially our public realm allows for all of that? I don't need to say anymore. Thank you. So on the left is Albuquerque. It's not even safe to ride your bike on the sidewalk, but in this particular area. And it doesn't have to start from scratch. This is Puebla, the city of Puebla in Mexico, which is, historic, etc., but still managed to make a provision to say bicycles welcome here. But on the other end of the scale is when you can start from scratch. In Lyon, we have by Gautier and Conquet, is that right, architects. This is truly a complete street from end to end. The buffering between the bikes and pedestrians are protected from each other and also protected from vehicular traffic. I'm gonna guess that traffic moves very slowly along this street, and in other areas, this inclusion of transit as part of the system, all modes for all people. Diversity, I think it's the fourth, the third, I don't know. Of uses, of types of spaces, of chances to do something or not do anything. Diversity in the types of public spaces. This is one of the many kind of somewhat temporary or not necessarily permanent, but lighter, quicker, cheaper public spaces in New York City. This is in Dumbo. That kind of creates a public space out of a street, right, with pretty low investment. I saw something similar in Mexico City. Even in the historic core, there are even some exercise machines over to the far end on the right, where you might see somebody just kind of sitting on a stationary bike and pedaling or not pedaling. The other fear that I had when I saw this, though, there's nobody here from Projects for Public Spaces, is there? I got this idea, it's like, oh my God, Projects for Public Spaces is franchising public space. So, and Kat knows. Yes. And finally, this idea of having fun. I mean, isn't that what we want? Isn't that what makes public space or any space or neighborhoods memorable? Being able to ride your bike in the street with your friends, but also being allowed to. This sculpture, for those, many of you may know it, it's in Seattle, it's called the Interurban, and the artist meant for people to play with it. It wasn't sacred. So at the very beginning, he actually started adding, the hats and the flowers and all of that. And then people got the idea that it was okay, and now it happens all the time. This was interesting, this laundromat project. Artists kind of help us a lot. Artists, art, etc. And how do you transform a space that's otherwise mundane into, like, I think I want to go do laundry. So bringing art to everyday places and bringing everyday places to art. Building creative capacity among artists and everybody else. Fun things that can happen. These are kind of in the tactical urbanism category. Some former students of mine, after they graduated in Cincinnati, they got really committed to over the Rhine, where there were a lot of vacant properties, and they got this idea that they could just paint the board ups and it would at least look better. Well, now they're in business. And they get contracts from the city to do this. And they do other beautification projects, and now they're collaborating with a mural project in the city, but you see their work all over the neighborhood. And now it's starting to disappear because that area is redeveloping. On the right, has anybody heard of knit bombing? Yeah, you usually see like a little nip bomb on a parking meter or a tree. Well, how about a bus? So the bombshells. This was a great project with the public bus company to bomb a whole bus. We had some fun in the International District trying to just host a festival to be part of a project about rethinking public space and creating public space in the International District. And it's actually landscape architecture students did the structures that got moved around, participated in a ciclovia, etc. And a bunch of us got together on a weekend and painted chairs just so that they would be fun. I think we gave them away so they're out in the community. This one, I can't remember this is in Querétaro in Mexico. Just stumbled upon this. This is, a very traditional open space square in front of the church. It's like, what are these people doing? Well, oh, whoops. Do I have to go back with that? Traditional dance as exercise on a schedule. So clearly some really know this routine. There were the choreographers, the leaders. Some knew this was going to happen and show up. And others just go, maybe I'd like to move like that a little bit. So a way that this kind of social event that is culturally relevant also participates in generating physical activity and maybe healthier outcomes. So to conclude, I want to talk about some tools you can use. These ideas that have been tried in other places that some of which might be useful here or wherever you are. Complete streets. The idea of mixed-use zoning, and this is something that we're getting with our new IDO. Form-based codes, transit-oriented development, upzoning for greater density, more activity. And by the way, I just want to quote a friend, Teddy Cruz, who once said, what if we measure density not in dwelling units per acre, but in social interactions per acre? Which I think is just awesome, and that I invite you, if you want to work on that, I'd love to get together with you on that. So community land trusts, which are ways to preserve affordability even in home ownership over long periods of time and from generation to generation. Tax abatements, Main Street programs through the National Trust for Historic Preservation help communities organize around places that they care about and manage it and can turn it around. Nob Hill has been a great success story in the Main Street program in New Mexico. Land banking. This is something we really, I think, could think about creatively as we know that the ART is coming, the IDO is going to come along. There are undervalued, underutilized properties in town that we could think about on a community level about securing and getting ready for equitable development. And believe me, the for-profit developers are already doing it. So how can we play in that game? And I've seen it work successfully for affordable housing, for instance. Community engagement and gatherings, not just holding a meeting to say we want to talk about your neighborhood, but actually saying, hey, why don't we have some food together? Why don't we dance? Why don't we sing? It all helps build this idea of social connectedness. Art is such a powerful ingredient, and all of that together can actually lead to fun. So where can we find more? Here are some books and some resources that I've found to be really useful, and I'd be happy to share with you. At least one of them is written by my own colleague, Mark Childs, here on urban composition. Making healthy places is one of several, and probably most of the literature about the connections between the built environment, design, and health are actually written by health professionals. It's about time for designers to step up. And then some of the foundations and others that are doing funding and promotion around these ideas are on the right, and at the end, so there's everywhere from private foundations to federal agencies to local agencies and nonprofits, and at the bottom I highlighted local universities and colleges. Roger here always uses his studios to kind of provoke about what could happen or should happen right here in Albuquerque. So, and then just to end with, because fun is so important, a little project I was involved in. And I just can't turn it up.
It's very colorful. Everyday people having a chance to create art. It's about being able to share something